Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, greetings once again, everybody. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Bruce Markison. As always, I'm joined by co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how you doing this week?
Doing good, Bruce. How's everything been going with you?
Other than some glitches here and there, we're doing okay. We're hanging in there.
Good.
We're recording two times in the last 3 nights. It's been a marathon for us. So if we sound a little bit tired, that would be the reason. We'll still air these shows in their proper order on Podbean and YouTube, but it's been a busy time for us. And one of the reasons we wanted to record tonight was to make room for this guest. I'm going to introduce him now. This week's guest is someone who actually joined us twice during the very early weeks of this podcast, going back 3 years to 2023. And we are very much overdue in having him back on the show. We're glad to have him this week. He is Brian Forrest, also known as Toothpickings. Brian is an expert on vampires within popular culture. He's authored many articles on the subject of vampires. He's written for Tucker Christine's wonderful scholarly magazine, Dracula Beyond Stoker, and has also provided numerous commentaries on YouTube, frequent guest on podcasts, including twice before on this very program. Brian, it's good to see you again and hear from you. How have you been?
Thanks, Bruce. Great to hear your voice again. And I mean that because you do have a great voice. And thanks for having me back here again.
Yeah, it's been way too long, and that is completely my fault. We get all wrapped up in other guests, other topics, and we sometimes forget about the people that we really started out with. And so we're trying to make up for that. But we have some interesting topics to discuss this evening, including director William Crain. Also, your involvement with something called the Dracula Congress. We're going to explain what that is. Brian won an award from that organization, that group. And we'll also talk a little bit about the hit film, vampire film that came out in 2025, Sinners, which is up for 16 Academy Awards. We'll get Brian's hunch on whether he thinks it might take home Best Picture honors. We'll see if that occurs. Before we get to all that, though, Tracy is going to start us off. Tracy?
So, Brian, for listeners who may not have caught your earlier appearances here on the Ghostly Gallery podcast, do you want to share with us what sparked your interest in vampires and the fascination with vampires in popular culture?
Well, I always had a latent interest in vampires. It was just there through cultural osmosis, I suppose. But at some point, I got more and more interested in the intersection of vampires when it came to history and folklore and fiction.
Mhm.
And there's sort of there's a crossroads there, a three-way crossroads. And sometimes you find really interesting things at that crossroads, where the historical record will inform the fiction, where the folklore will inform the fiction. More recently, I've talked to some experts who have found places where the fiction informs the folklore, which is opening up my brain to a whole new group of possibilities. That was the last interview that I posted on my channel, was with Nina Traska about that subject, in fact.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's so cool. I'm going to have to go check that out. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Brian, back in 2024, you reported on your Facebook page and maybe other forms of social media on the passing of director William Crain. He is the man who directed for TV shows like Mod Squad, Starsky and Hutch, and The Dukes of Hazzard. But more pertinently for our subject matter, he was the guy that gave us Blacula in 1972. He directed that rather historic film. Almost no other media outlets that I have seen have reported on Crain's death, even though it's now been 2 years. Even look at his IMDb page, and there is only a birth date. No death date is included. I'm curious, why do you think this is? Why has this sort of slipped through the cracks?
I wish I had a good answer for that. Uh, William Crain had been kind of out of the game for a while when he passed away, although he never gave up on the idea of making another horror film. He was he had been out of directing for a good bit by that point. So I don't think he had an agent who would have announced that. His immediate family may have just decided that they didn't want to trouble with making a big proclamation like that. Honestly, I don't know. I waited a while before saying anything on my own Facebook page because I thought, well, surely, like you, I thought somebody is going to say something. There'll be a more official announcement. At the very least, maybe Warner Brothers will issue something, but nothing was forthcoming. So at some point, I said, okay, I guess I'm going to be the one to say something about it.
Yeah. How did you yourself find out?
The last time I saw him in person would have been in May of 2023. I went to see him in Los Angeles. At that time, he had only recently gone into some assisted living. He'd been living on his own quite well for a long time. He and his son had lived together. It was to the point where he was just having too much trouble getting around. He did need some help. So he went into assisted living. I went to go see him, and I tried to call him. We would have phone conversations every other week or so. And at one point, I couldn't get a hold of him, and I didn't think anything of it. And then tried to get a hold of him again, and the phone was disconnected. And at that point, I said, "Oh, something's going on here." So I contacted the home to ask, could anyone put me in touch, or did he lose his phone, or what was going on? And the folks who ran the place told me what had happened.
Mm.
So at that point, I don't think anyone but his immediate family would have known. So I kept it under my hat for a while, out of respect and in case they wanted to make that announcement themselves.
Yeah. You knew him very well. He, of course, African American, and you talk about somebody who would have been working back in the 60s and 70s. That was not an easy time to be either a Black actor or a Black director. What kinds of specific obstacles did he have to overcome to succeed as a director?
Yeah, I'm sure there's people, a lot of people who would say it's not easy today, but you can just imagine how much more difficult it would be in
Yeah.
that time period. You know, there's two sides of that coin. On the one hand, I think William Crain was kind of had a little bit of a blessed path because he had some support. He had some people looking out for him that opened some doors. At the same time, those doors that got opened, I think there were people around who thought he should not have deserved to have even walked through those doors.
Hmm.
Who thought that who's this guy? He didn't he doesn't look like me, and B, he didn't pay the same dues I paid. That I think there's room for all kinds of people to have all kinds of interpretations, but it was very much a white dominated industry at that time. I'm sure to a large extent it still is, but even more so in the 60s and 70s. So I
Yeah.
think he had all the challenges that you could imagine a person of color having at that time. And
You know,
add to that, this doesn't get as much publicity, but he also he had a physical impairment as well. So you put those two things together, and he had what we might say two strikes against him. That a lot of folks would say, "What this guy can't even walk around the set as quickly as I can. Who on earth let him on this set?"
was he disabled, handicapped in some way?
Yeah, I mean, he could move around. He could walk, but he walked with, I guess you would say, he walked with a limp, a
Yeah.
pretty pronounced limp.
So in 1972, he directs what, as we look back at now, is a groundbreaking film and in one of your absolute favorites. I love it too, and that's Blacula.
Mhm.
He was all of 23. And the idea of somebody making a major motion picture at 23, when most of us are either just out of college or a few years out of high school, How is it even possible for him to do this? It's remarkable.
I'm going to have to correct you on that. He would not have been 23. Let me do a little math real quick. He would have been, I think he would have been about 33 at
Oh,
the
really?
time he was making
Okay.
Blacula. Yeah.
Okay. So he was
Uh,
older.
yeah. And he had already been working in the arts for a while. He worked in theater. He had gone up to Canada and done some acting, some in front of the camera stuff before coming back to California and trying to get behind the camera. So he had some experience. He wasn't, a kid right out of college making his first feature. Although he was making his first feature, he had some experience on set by the time Blacula was made.
Right. Very interesting.
Let me
You
run
look
with
back.
that a little bit. I want to run with that just a little bit more, Bruce.
Sure.
This is not a thing that gets said often enough about Blacula. It was the first feature for a lot of the principal creatives involved. It was William Crain's first feature. It was the writer's first feature. It was the producer's first feature. William Marshall, the star, had been in a few films before. You'll have to check me on this, Bruce, but I don't think he had a starring role in a feature film by that point. He had some supporting roles. I don't think he had a starring role when he was cast in Blacula.
That's amazing, given what an accomplished actor he was. I believe he was trained in Shakespearean
Mhm.
productions, and that was his first one.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
he was noted. Several critics said he was the best Othello of the day. And if you look hard enough, you can find some videos on YouTube of him playing Othello. The quality's not very good, but his presence still comes through on those videos.
We like Blacula. It obviously has a lot of fans, major cult classic. How did William Crain view the film? Was he happy with the way it came out?
Oh, very much so. He was very proud of it. There were parts that he admitted he would do differently today. Uh, he really bristled at the use of the N-word. And
Hmm.
he said that, yeah, if I could do that again, there's two things I'd change. He said he wouldn't allow the N-word to be used, and the way that the gay interior decorators, the gay antique dealers were
Yeah.
treated. He thinks he would change if he was redoing it today. But
Yeah,
on the
there was a
whole, yes, he's very proud of it.
yeah. And it was a different standard, a different time.
Mhm.
The N-word was used in many blaxploitation films. It was used in, other areas, other genres of film. It was a common thing. Today, much less so the case, and that's probably a good thing, I would think. Let's talk a bit about another film that he did, 1976, so it's now 50 years ago. William Crain returned to horror with a movie called Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde. It's a lesser film than Blacula, but it does feature a good performance by Bernie Casey, former NFL football player turned actor, very good actor. He plays the two title roles.
Mhm.
I'm curious what you think of the film and what Crain thought of it as well.
I think that he was realistic in his assessment of it. I think it was the best film it could have been, given how cheaply it had to be made, how quickly it had to be made. It was much like Blacula, I think it was punching above its weight class. There were some really big ideas in both of those films that they probably could have executed better if they'd had more funding, more time. But in both of those films, they were making them very quickly for as little money as possible. And they probably, reality is a hell of an assistant director, and it kind of determines what you can actually get into the camera quite often.
Yeah. I was a big fan of Bernie Casey. He
He's
played one of the
great.
gargoyles
Yeah.
in the made-for-TV movie Gargoyles, although they, for some reason, didn't use his voice, and he had a wonderful voice. Probably best remembered for playing UN Jefferson in A Revenge of the Nerds in the early
Mhm.
80s. A very funny movie, and he plays off some of the comic aspects of that fraternity that come seeking his endorsement. So he was a terrific actor, maybe a better actor than he was a football player, and he was a pretty decent football player too. What did you think of the job that he did playing those two roles?
He made the transition really well. I mean, he's a shockingly good actor for having been an athlete right before. You don't usually expect someone to walk off a football field and be that good in front of a camera. But yeah, I think he's got quite a bit of charisma. He's built way too good to be a scientist. You see, it's the same joke in every rock movie where they have to explain why a guy built like that is actually a molecular biologist.
Right.
But it's he's quite good. The story that Crain told me is that he was moonlighting on at least part of that film. He was doing Starsky and Hutch at the time. And so he would race across town to direct segments of Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde, which originally wasn't called that. It was originally called The Watts Monster. Really? At some point, I think someone saw the obvious parallels with Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde and said, hey, you know what's going to sell better than The Watts Monster is something that sounds like a familiar property, the same way Blacula does, the same way that they went with Blackenstein after that, right?
Yeah. Well, this movie, for its flaws, was much better than Blackenstein. There's no question about that. The special effects, or the makeup effects, as limited as they were, done by a pretty famous guy, Stan Winston, and they apply kind of a powdery white makeup to Bernie Casey when he makes the transformation. He's injecting himself with a serum that is meant to be a treatment for liver disease, I guess liver cancer, but it has this unintended effect of making him into this very angry, superhuman being, very violent, and he essentially goes on a killing spree. But Stan Winston is a huge name in the makeup and makeup effect business. Interesting how he got involved.
I don't know how he got involved, to be honest. But you're right. Stan Winston's a big name, as is Tak Fujimoto, who was the cinematographer on the film. To be honest, I don't know how either one of those came to be involved in this low-budget, almost fly-by-night production, but the work is really good. I don't know that it's Stan Winston's best work. I don't think anyone would argue that. I don't think it's Tak Fujimoto's best work, but you can see them both developing their craft as you watch that film.
Well, if nothing else, it shows that Crain knew talent, and he made some good choices there. So I watched this on Tubi over the weekend. It was the first time I ever saw the film, though I certainly heard about it. And the film that I saw on Tubi was very grainy. It had some glitches. A couple of times it actually goes into slow motion when it's not supposed to do that. Do you know if there are any better prints out there of Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde?
The version I saw was on YouTube. That certainly sounds like it streamed better than your version. I do know that there is someone out there working on getting a Blu-ray version together. I don't know if they are getting the original print of it or a print of it to transfer to Blu-ray. I'm not sure how they're doing that, but I do know that there is someone working on getting a Blu-ray version together. So hopefully we'll have a version at some point that looks the way it should look.
Yeah. Yeah, it really has kind of a grindhouse look, the print that I saw. And if they can remaster it in any way, that may be a more fitting result to all of this. So he does Blacula. He does Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde. He did do quite a bit of television work. I think he did a couple of films after that. But he never again returned to horror. Did he tell you why?
No. Well, yes and no. He always wanted to have a third horror movie. And he was playing around with the idea of a werewolf movie. At the same time, he kept playing around with the idea of Westerns. He loved Westerns. And he had an idea for a Western that anyone he told it to would say, forget the werewolf. That's the movie you need to make. And unfortunately, it never came to be. But to answer your question directly on, he had a hard time getting hired. You're right, he did do some television, but he had a real hard time getting another film job, and after a while, he had a hard time getting other television work. And I think that stemmed from a few things were probably going on. Some of it is just changing tastes. It happens. Some of it probably stemmed from the fact that he was trying actively to get more Black representation behind the camera. And I think that may have rubbed some people the wrong way. It wasn't quite the same as being on a blacklist, but it is almost the same as being on a blacklist, what happened to him. I think that's really unfortunate. So he never got to do another feature film after Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde. He did do some television, but as time went on, even that dried up. Here and there, he did some jobs that I don't think even really appeared on IMDb for one reason or another. His IMDb list is a little bit suspect because there's some things that should be on there that aren't. There's at least one thing that's on there that shouldn't be. Really? And I wonder, unfortunately, he passed away before I could really get a full resume from him and find out every single thing he ever did. Not that I could have, because I'm sure he would have forgotten some small thing he had done in 50 years ago. It'd be easy to forget.
Yeah. Do you remember the credit that was put to his name that he really wasn't involved with?
Dukes of Hazzard. He didn't actually end up
Really?
directing that episode of Dukes of Hazzard. Yeah.
Interesting. That at one time I remember that was the #1 show in the country.
Oh, yeah.
Ratings.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I watched it all the time.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. Do you think he got pigeonholed as a blaxploitation director? Was that maybe part of the problem?
That could be. And even though I don't think of Blacula as being a blaxploitation film, I don't think it checks the boxes necessary to be blaxploitation. Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde, yeah, maybe. I think that one probably does check the boxes. But Blacula, to be fair, I don't think Blacula gets made without the blaxploitation movement. But I think itself doesn't quite qualify as being one of those films. I suppose it depends on what kind of criteria you want to put forth for what makes a blaxploitation picture. But every criteria I have seen, Blacula doesn't quite qualify.
I see.
But to your original point, I think a lot of people would think of it. They're like, oh, it's a black cast. It was made in the 70s. Of course, it's blaxploitation. So yeah, I think that it is possible that he did get stuck in that groove. I think he probably would have been happy continuing to work in television. But at some point, there was no television jobs anymore either.
Not everything fits into a neat category, neat box,
Right.
as much as we try to do that. As you look back at his accomplishments, the films that he did, the TV shows that he did do, a lot of it coming in the 1970s, what do you think William Crain's legacy should be?
Well, I know what he would say. He was always very proud of his son. He would like his son to be his legacy. And in fact, he would say that he probably didn't fight as hard as he should have to stay in entertainment because he wanted to raise his son. He had his son late in life. So I think he was okay taking a step back to be the parent who was home for his kid. He didn't have a father growing up, and he didn't want to be that guy. He wanted his son to have his parents around. But what should his legacy be to those of us who don't know his family? I think it will be Blacula, and I think he's okay with that. I think he is proud of that. He wishes that there had been more, but he always looked fondly on that film. And he's not going to have a problem with us celebrating him as being the director of Blacula and hanging that on him as his legacy.
That's not a bad legacy to have.
No, we should all be so lucky.
Yeah.
So, Brian, you had a chance to get to know William Crain personally. On a personal level, can you share with us what he meant to you and what you will remember most about him?
Yeah, that's a great question. He was one of the most gentle people I've ever met. Incredibly accommodating with his time. He I always thought today's going to be the day he's going to tell me to stop asking questions about Blacula, and he never did. And, we would talk about anything and everything, and then I would say, "Oh, hey, I have one more question for you about Blacula that I occurred to me last week," and he was happy to talk about it. He loved to talk about that film. He loved to talk about his entertainment career. I think he looked back fondly on it despite the obstacles he had to overcome.
Mhm.
And in fact, it you kind of had to pull that out of him. Uh, he was not the sort of guy who wanted to linger on the the challenges, the obstacles that he had to deal with as
Right.
a young Black director at that time. He wanted to talk about the successes and the accomplishments and the things that went well. And if you wanted to hear about the stuff that was hard, you almost had to needle him a little bit to get him to go to that place. And then once you got him there, it was game on. He was ready to grind that axe a little bit. But
Right.
he didn't really want to be remembered as the the poster child for the Black struggle.
Mhm.
And that sounds like I'm being dismissive, but this was kind of where he was coming from. If you asked him, "Do you want to be remembered as a important director or an important Black director?" He would jump, wouldn't hesitate. "I want to be remembered as a important director." And I think it was only as he was getting later on in his years that he kind of realized that, "Oh, I'm going to be remembered as this seminal early Black director. I guess I should embrace that." And he did, and he was okay with that legacy. But if you had asked him even 10 years ago, "How do you want to be remembered?" he would just say, "Director," with no adjective in front of it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But yeah, one of the friendliest guys you could ever meet. It's hard to imagine that anyone had a problem with him on set because I've never met anyone who was more soft-spoken, more generous, just friendly to anybody he met.
Mm.
He sounds like a wonderful human being, that's for sure, and I really appreciate you sharing a little bit of information with us about
I'm
how
happy
he
to.
was as a human being, so thank
I'm
you.
happy to. There's not a lot of interviews or media with him, so
Mhm.
I'm happy to talk about him and get that side of him out.
Yeah, I did. I tried to do a little bit more research and you are right. There's really anything that came up was something that maybe you had shared or something like that. There really truly is not much online to even refer to.
No, no, there's a couple podcasts, one or two shows like this,
Mhm.
but very little. And especially when he was active in his career, there's nothing. It was all kind of stuff that was retrospective in the last 10 years or so when people started to kind of realize the importance of Blacula, that people started saying, "Oh, we need to find William Crain and talk to him a little bit."
Mm.
And that's hard because he was pretty reclusive. He was hard to find.
Yeah. Some very nice recollections of the late William Crane. We continue our conversation with Brian Forrest, also known as Toothpickings, an expert on not only Dracula, but vampires in film and vampires in books, vampires in popular culture. A few other topics to address, Brian, while we have you. On a personal front, you recently received an award from the Children of the Night International Dracula Congress. This was back in November. And I have to admit that when I saw you post about it, this was the first time I had ever heard of this Children of the Night Dracula Congress. What exactly is it?
Well, first of all, I'll say that I didn't start this. I joined it at about 3 years ago. It's been going on for a number of years. It is run out of Brasov, Transylvania. And if I understand the history correctly, and I hope none of the organizers come after me for this, it grew out of a centenary conference that happened in London around Dracula when Dracula was celebrating its 100th year. A number of scholars said, hey, we want to keep this dialogue going. So they created this Congress that happens every year after Halloween for one reason or another. Although it's still a little bit of remnant spooky season going on. And scholars from all around the world come and discuss sometimes specifically Dracula topics, but quite often other topics around vampires and other Gothic subjects. And it's moved to mostly online. It used to be completely in person, then it went half and half. And this last year, it was, I believe, entirely online. I don't know if they're going to continue doing entirely online, but the good news is that anybody can watch it. You don't have to pay a hefty fee to come in and listen and view these presentations. Some of them are very scholarly, which is to say a little dense for us people who only have a bachelor's degree, but a lot of them are very accessible.
I love that it started in Transylvania. I mean, how can you get me better than that?
Yeah, there's nothing like walking around saying, yeah, I got an award from a conference that takes place in Transylvania. That's a good way to feel like you've got a couple of ribbons right here on your chest.
Now, you said you joined 3 years ago, but it's been around a long time. When they were meeting in person, did they ever meet in Transylvania, or was it other places?
I think they moved around a little bit initially, but they were meeting in Transylvania by the time I got involved. I'll correct myself. It was 4 years ago that I got involved. I had to count backwards how many presentations I've done there. But yeah, I think they may have met in Ireland at one point. But I think now that the University of Transylvania at Brasov is sort of hosting them, they have centered it in Transylvania ever since.
Yeah. So did you go there? Did you go to Transylvania?
No, I hope to someday. I have not.
Yeah. So last year was virtual, and you did receive an award there. Tell us about it.
The award of the presentation.
Tell us both. Yeah.
Well, the award was for best research, and the presentation was about a sailor, an American sailor from the 1860s named James Brown. It is a bit of an urban legend that has gotten a lot of traction over the years. And every year around Halloween, this story will kind of get brought up in News of the Weird corners of either at one point newspapers would publish news of the weird sort of things, and now it's moved online. And the story is kind of always relatively the same, that this sailor was killing his fellow sailors, was drinking their blood, and then somehow was convicted of his crimes, but was pardoned by a U.S. president. That's the popular version of the story. So I wanted to dig into that story some more. I'd only found one other person who really dug into it, Robert Damon Schneck, around 2000, I believe, wrote a book, and he had one chapter dedicated to the story. And I wanted to dive into it as well. I departed from some of his conclusions and I expanded on some of the work he had done. But as far as I know, we're the only two people to look at this story from a historical perspective and find out, well, what really happened? So I went in with 3 questions. Did any of this urban legend version of the story happen? If it did happen, how the hell did a president get involved? And most importantly, because I don't for a second believe that this gentleman was a actual vampire, how did the story come about that he was a vampire? And so those are the questions that I set out to answer. And the presentation lasting anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, depending on where I was giving it, I tried to answer those questions as best I could.
Which president was allegedly involved?
Andrew Johnson, the president who I think still holds the record for the most acts of clemency, because he issued a whole lot relative to the Civil War. So I always imagined that he just kind of always had his pardon pen in his hand, and people were just constantly putting papers in front of him, and he just kept signing his signature as each new piece of paper went in front of him. I don't think he was intimately knowledgeable about James Brown's case. I think I found some of the correspondence back and forth between his staff and some attorneys in Boston who were pleading for clemency, and Johnson's staff said, yeah, okay, we'll take action on this. And they just put one more piece of paper in front of Johnson. He signed it, and off it went. Now,
he
James
was the
Brown
president that succeeded Lincoln, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
He succeeded Lincoln, yeah.
He did.
Well, that makes sense because, there was the movie Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which I have taken as completely true, right?
The joke I made in the presentation was, if you were an enterprising sort of writer, maybe you do a sequel to Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and it's Andrew Johnson, Vampire Enabler, as he is just releasing all the vampires from prison out into the world.
Wow. Well, as you look back at this sailor James Brown, I tend to doubt that he was an actual vampire, but maybe he believed he was.
Good instinct. I don't think he was a vampire. I don't think he believed he was a vampire because, as we find out when we dig into the research, he never drank anybody's blood.
No.
His original murder was with a knife, and he threw that knife overboard. He didn't lick it clean or anything. The story of how he became a blood drinker comes up many years later. And I spent a lot of time trying to pinpoint, when does the story become that he drank blood? And the earliest example I have was 1878. So that would have been about 12 years after his conviction. And that was in the Boston Globe. I don't know why that story pops up in the Boston Globe that he drank blood. I don't know if it was sort of a confluence of people who worked in the prison talking about him or what it was, but that's the first time anyone ever says he drank blood. And from that point onward, it is always associated with him.
Yeah.
Every time his story pops up about him, he drank his captain's blood, he drank his sailor's blood. None of that is true. All of these stories say he drank blood in his original crime when he killed someone on that ship. None of them say he's drinking blood right now, or he stabbed a prisoner and then drank their blood. No, it's always he was drinking the sailor's blood, no matter how long ago it was. We know that didn't happen. So somehow that gets grafted onto his legend and it never goes away. He generates a lot of newsprint. By the time 1892 rolls around, there's a flood of newspaper articles about him. And they all say some version of he was killing sailors and drinking their blood on the Indian Ocean in 1866, which didn't happen.
So this is the research that earned you this award.
It did. Finding lots and lots of primary sources and putting them in a PowerPoint, I guess is the thing that gets the awards, because I think that's what I think that in a conference like that, you have a lot of people doing literary criticism and literary comparative literary analysis, something that I am terrible at, which you're going to find out when we get to Sinners. But there's fewer people who are doing that kind of historical research where they're going and finding primary sources and displaying them sometimes for the first time. Not all of these items were things that had never been seen before, but some of them were. And so I was proud to be able to bring a few documents to light that had not been public before, that maybe hadn't even been digitized before.
Yeah.
So I think that that is the, if I can extend the vampire metaphor, that was the nail in the coffin that got me that award.
So do you plan to publish an article at some point about this?
I think maybe so.
Yeah.
At the time, I said I didn't know what I was going to do with all this. I was kind of had all this information, and what do I do with it? Do I just do the presentation and call it a day, move on to other things? I don't know. I think that maybe it should be in a paper somewhere, or a monograph if there's the audience for something like that. But yeah, I think it needs to be out there in some manner, because if you Google James Brown, anybody who's watching this podcast and getting a little bored with listening to me, maybe is already doing that, you're reading misinformation right now.
Hmm.
So maybe it is a good idea to get this out so that some of that record gets corrected.
Nice award from the Children of the Night International Dracula Congress. So they'll be meeting again in November. It is virtual. Anybody can participate. Don't have to be a scholar or an author. It can just be a fan like we are. Is there any cost
Great
to it?
opportunity. No cost. Great opportunity for anybody who is just interested in this sort of thing to tune in. They do keep Transylvanian hours. So if you live in America, your best bet is to catch whatever is going on at the tail end of each one of their days, which is morning to about noon, 1 p.m.
Okay.
But if
Might have
you're
to take
if you're
some time off
diehard
from work to listen to that.
if you're diehard, you can get up at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and catch the whole thing each day.
Yeah. Well, I would just stay up through the night because I stay up till midnight anyway. So a couple of extra hours is not a
That sounds on brand. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I recommend anyone tuning into that. If you're interested in vampire scholarship, if you're new to it, or if it's an old hat, it's a great place to learn a lot, and it doesn't cost you a thing. You can do it right from your own home.
It sounds fascinating. I love it. One more topic we'd like to talk about with Brian Forrest, also known as Toothpickings. And of course, coming up in March, we will have the Academy Awards. The most nominated film in history is Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler. 16 nominations total, including Best Picture. We've not had a chance to talk about Sinners. We've talked about it a lot on this show with other people, but not with you. So I want to get your quick review. Did you like the film as much as the critics seem to like it?
I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was absolutely great. And how blessed are we that we got the Interview with the Vampire series, Nosferatu, and Sinners all within a year of each other. We're spoiled as vampire fans. It was a great year to be a vampire fan, 2024 into 2025.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm seeing some backlash against it on Facebook, on Twitter. People that say that they're fans of vampire films, horror films, but they say, the first hour, there's nothing about vampires. It's boring. It's overrated. People are just saying they like it because Hollywood embraced it. The Hollywood media embraced it. I'm not really buying any of that. It doesn't sound like you are either.
No, if you need a vampire to appear in Act 1, Scene 1, then you'll be let down. But no, it's in every classic vampire film, no one even says what we're dealing with here is a vampire until the beginning of Act 3, basically, when the Van Helsing character shows up. So we should be primed to have to wait for that part of the movie anyway.
Plus, it was a 2.5-hour film, as I remember.
What?
So even though they don't get to the
it flew by.
vampires, they don't get to the vampires for the first hour, but you still have an hour 15, hour 30 to go. And there was a lot of action in that third act and a lot of developments that took place.
A lot of great stuff.
Beautifully filmed. What's that?
A lot of great stuff before that too. The only thing I could credit that criticism is if we were led to believe we were watching a slice of life from the 1930s up until Act 3, where suddenly it turned supernatural. But we're not. We're clued in that there's something supernatural going on real early on in the film. We're put on notice that
I agree completely.
This is the world we live in. Yeah, we don't think we're not. It's not like we would be watching Train Dreams, and then all of a sudden, the gates of hell open up in the final 15 minutes of the movie. No, we know what we're in for.
Yeah. People have asked me, do you think it's going to win? Do you think it should win? And the latter question, I don't really know the answer because of the other 9 candidates. I've only seen Frankenstein, which I liked, but I didn't like as much as Sinners. The other 8 films are not really horror genre. One is science fiction, but still leaves 7 that are completely out of the realm of what we talk about. And frankly, those movies don't interest me. So I don't know whether it should win. I would love to see it win. I think it would be great for the genre. I'm curious, Brian, what is your hunch? You think it's going to win with all this publicity, the 16 nominations?
I
I
have
know they've got a
been
lot of competition. What's your hunch?
Yeah. Well, I have never had my favorite film win an Oscar. I have been jaded about the Oscars since, well, let's go all the way back to Forrest Gump beating out both Pulp Fiction and The Shawshank Redemption for Best Picture. And it hasn't gotten better since then. So my hopes are low, not because I don't think it's a great film, but because there has been a trend that the films that I think are the best ones tend to not win the Best Picture. Now, with 16 nominations, and I think you said this, I think it was that's a record for the most nominations.
Yes.
I would be shocked if it doesn't get a few through. I mean, it's a beautiful film. I could see it being a contender for cinematography, although it's got some real stiff competition for cinematography. What else? Let's see. It was Best Director. I could see it winning Best Director, but not winning Best Picture. That could happen.
Michael B. Jordan, Best Actor.
Quite possibly. Hollywood loves it when you do something a little strange, and playing both twins could be the thing.
Yeah.
And
making them distinctive. Yeah.
Yeah. on a personal note, I'm glad they coated them with different colors because I wasn't always sure which one I was watching on screen at one time or another. So I'm glad one was red and one was blue. So I was always real clear who I was seeing if the scenes were going really fast. Now, question for you. I know that it was nominated for a best song. Is that the song with the really great scene, the scene that we all remember? Or is that a different song? Does anybody remember?
I think it's that song with the big dance scene.
The big dance scene, I could absolutely see that winning.
Yeah.
What else? Production design is harder to sort of maybe put a finger on, but absolutely, I could see it being a real contender for that. In my experience, the Oscars like to send things like costume and hair and makeup to. It seems like period films always have a big edge.
Yeah.
With those and period meaning like pre-1900s. So I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't get my hopes up too much for that. But also, a lot of people have always observed that the thing that takes the Best Picture tends to sweep a lot of the other awards. So if it can get in for Best Picture, maybe a lot of these down the ballot awards, it just sweeps up those as well.
Yeah. Well, it's vying to be the second true horror film to win the Best Picture. The first being The Silence of the Lambs, way back in the early 1990s. Yeah.
It's in really good company. Silence of the Lambs is one of my favorite horrors. And a lot of people, do you think that Silence of the Lambs, both of you, do you consider that a horror film? Because there are people who say, no, that transcends horror.
I think it's horror. It's bone chilling. Some of those scenes are just, to me, that's just a sheer scene of horror. Like it's thriller, psychological, but there are elements that are just like true blood horror. Absolutely. For me.
I agree. Just on Anthony Hopkins' scenes, I know he was only in there about 16 minutes, but every scene he's in is chilling. And then there's that makeshift prison, which I think was down in Atlanta. That whole sequence, that's horror. So yeah, to me, definite. Absolutely.
What do y'all think? How do you think Sinners is going to fare at the Oscars?
I wanted to win. I wanted to win Best Picture for sure. I just don't know where that's going to land with the Academy, but I believe it should win. I also really appreciated Begonia, which is also nominated. I thought that was another really great film, but I do prefer Sinners. I haven't, like Bruce mentioned, I haven't seen all of the other ones that have been nominated, but Sinners is so worthy of the title this year. They really are.
Well, if you'd like, can we connect some threads here? Because we started out this conversation talking about William Crain, who directed Blacula, which would be the first vampire film with a black vampire that most people would have ever seen. But then the topic of James Brown really became an urban legend in 1932 when a book called Wild Talents was published. And Sinners, of course, is set in 1932. Wild Talents is talking about a supposedly black vampire. James Brown was either mixed or black, depending on which account you read. So this book, Wild Talents, is published. It's available in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where Sinners is set. So we had this kind of sort of accidental confluence of Sinners being set in the same year that James Brown, the black sailor vampire, is sort of introduced or reintroduced to the public mainstream via this book, Wild Talents.
Oh, that's so cool.
Nicely done. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting Ryan Coogler did that intentionally. I think it's just a happy accident. This gets back into the sort of thing that I love about doing Toothpickings, where these historical things and these fictional things and these folklore things all sort of meet at a crossroads, sometimes intentionally, sometimes totally by accident. But isn't that crazy that that's the world we live in?
Love it. I absolutely love it. So I'm curious, one last question from me, Brian. After all of these years that you have spent studying vampires, what do you hope that people will take away from all of these vampire stories?
Oh, Tracy, you might have to edit this because you might have to give me a second to think on this one.
That's okay.
When the vampire stories, you mean the pieces of fiction that we all like?
So fiction, folklore, maybe urban legends, just the whole vampire lore.
Okay, ask me that question again.
So after all of these years that you have spent studying vampires, what do you hope that people will take away from vampire stories?
I hope people will look very hard at the vampire stories that sort of rise above the fray to become really popular and ask themselves, what purpose, what problem is this vampire story solving for society at this point? Why was this the story that became popular? Because almost without fail, the vampire stories that really capture the public imagination are doing something for us. They are speaking to some anxiety we have. They are addressing some issue that we as individuals within the society are dealing with or wrestling with. Dracula, I think, became so popular because it hit on a lot of those things all at once. And I love coming back to Dracula because you can view it through so many lenses. But I think James Brown captured the public imagination at the time he did because he was speaking to something that society needed him to speak to at the time. I think William Marshall did an amazing performance as Blacula, but that also was speaking to something that was in the air, especially at that time in 1972, that its intended audience and even its unintended audience really needed to hear. And I think Sinners is doing the same thing. I think some of the vampire stories that don't rise to the top, A, maybe they're just not that good, but B, they might be very good, but don't quite capture that question that we as a society are really asking of each other. So you could have a very well-made vampire film or a really good vampire book that doesn't quite become the top bestseller at that time because just bad timing. It just isn't addressing the right problem at the right time.
Oh, that's so interesting. That is deep. That's a lot to think about. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's what vampire stories have always done. Even when they were in the folklore, J. Gordon Melton was fond of saying that vampires, I'm going to have to paraphrase the way he said it, but they solve a problem for a society that society is having in that time and place. And that's why you get
Mhm.
so much variation in the folklore, because not every society was dealing with the same problem. They were dealing with different problems, and the vampire solved whatever their problem was. And today, with our fiction, they're doing the same thing.
Oh, I love it. Oh, thank you.
Very good. Our guest has been Toothpickings, also known in real life as Brian Forrest, writer, researcher, commentator, offering thoughts on William Crain, his award-winning research at the Dracula Congress, and of course, Sinners, up for Best Picture at this year's Academy Awards. Brian, I'm a subscriber to your YouTube channel, but for those who aren't, what do they have to do? They just look for Toothpickings and it's right there, correct?
It's real easy. Just you can type toothpickings into a YouTube search bar, or just search it on Google. It's a weird enough name that nobody else wanted to use it for anything except for me. So it's pretty easy to find. I haven't been posting as much lately. I'm hoping to start doing more of that now that I have uh, almost finished the documentary that I started making about William Crain a few years back, that I hope to get out to some film festivals, and maybe coming to a film festival near some of you, and maybe it'll live on in some other streaming service after that.
Yeah. Yeah, we look forward to that documentary on William Crain. Absolutely. Great stuff, Brian. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And Tracy, thank you for having me back.
Our thanks to Brian Forrest and to Tracy as well. We appreciate all of you joining us in this Museum of the Macabre. And we do hope you'll join us again next time, right here in the Ghostly Gallery.